They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be respected. The company cannot succeed without those people. They are the ones that turn out. They're the ones that provide the service. They're the ones that provide the product. They're the ones that focus on, they have a big impact on the cost and the quality of the product. If you don't have them on your side, you're not going to win the battle. And I don't care if you're a supervisor, a manager, a director, a vice president, a CEO, it doesn't matter. If your people are not performing to their potential, you'll never reach the potential that you could gain.
Welcome to my room, everyone. You typically see a black background, but I was asked by our team, they're like, show us your background, show us your office. So that's what I'm doing. I've taken a couple of weeks off, but you are still seeing these back to back. I only tell you that because I'm nervous to do these recordings again. Welcome back to It's a Matter of Speaking, a podcast for leading voices in the arenas of health, wealth, and relationships. We interview people that have masteries in their minds they've been cultivating. They have messages in their hearts they've been cultivating or sitting on. And they have taken the steps to get outside their comfort zone and get them into the world. And we get to see where it led to. Today's story is amazing. We talked to Larry Szeliga. I really messed that name up until I met him. Let me tell you a little bit about Larry, right? Larry Szeliga is a distinguished TEDx speaker, best-selling author, former C-suite executive with over 50 years of leadership and organizational development expertise. He's renowned for his strategic thinking and proven methodologies, having transformed workplace cultures at industry giants such as, see if you've heard of them, General Motors, GE, and Colgate. He's got a unique approach, consistently cultivating highly effective leaders, motivated employees, and successful organizations. Larry's journey from an hourly employee to CEO and board member of Blacksmith OTR in partnership with Michelin Tire exemplifies his unwavering dedication and unparalleled expertise. His motto, "Your life is your business and you are the boss," encapsulates his vision for MYOB Publishing LLC. Here, he continues his legacy of empowering individuals, reinforcing that each person is the ultimate authority of their own life and business. This dude was awesome. That didn't go anywhere. That just fell right here. It was so humbling chatting with this guy who's done so much, and then hearing his approach to working with businesses, going into a place and saying, hey, I don't know everything as someone that's hired as the COO. You do. Employees, how can I make your job the best? How can I help you be the best employee for this company? Humble leadership is what I took. He talks about inspiring and engaging as a leader rather than commanding and controlling. And of course, that's easy to hear, harder to act upon. So he talks about how you can act upon it, how you can really open that untapped potential for people in your organization. If you're a leader listening to this, if you're not a leader in your organization listening to this and you're like, hopefully this gives you a kick in the ass of like, holy shit, I do have untapped potential. I'm going to let it out. I'm going to figure out how to be the best at what I do, where I'm at. And I'm going to make sure my leaders know that that's what I'm shooting for. And this is what I desire to be able to do that. Because he says company can't succeed without these employees, engaging in change, less about the problem that leaders are seeing and more about the change that needs to happen in order to get where they want to get to. So many good stories. How to tackle fear, how to stretch ourselves to our own potential and what that feels like, and how to take that first step. Absolute incredible interview. And today, this interview is sponsored by, we're now called Leader. There's Thought Leader, then Speaker Mastermind, now Leader with no second E, Leadr. Leader as a company, we have helped almost 700 people now land TEDx talks around the world. Thousands more speak on virtual and physical stages around the world. We want to help people get their authentic message out to the world. Typically, I read something. It's a little ad read. That's not authentic. Let me tell you. We want to help you get your authentic message out to the world using your expertise, your mastery in your mind, your message in your heart, something that you've been working towards or for years. How do you now take that to the next stage? Springboard your speaking career or potentially your business career. We have back-end offers that show you how to authentically start and scale your business. One of our clients just did $26,000 in 1 week using social media and organic content. Organic equals authentic content. People hear from her and say, I want your help, and then reach out. We teach them how to create an offer, market it authentically, and then sell it at a heart center, predictably, so you know how to take someone from where they're at to making a good decision for themselves. Whether that's working with you or somebody else really doesn't fucking matter. How do you keep your heart in the right place so you can do what you love daily? I run that program. You get to work with somebody like me. If that's something you're interested in, there's links in the bio below. Feel free to click them. Feel free to jump on a call. We have free breakthrough calls. There's also a webinar you can watch from Taylor Conroy, super sexy guy. Walks through the importance of getting a TEDx talk to expand your reach and your platform. Click that link. While you're down there, just click that button that looks like this, comment, share it, tell people about this small podcast that's getting started and this awesome redhead that runs it. Because the more people we can reach, the more we can help our clients get their message out to the world authentically and organically. It is because of you that we can grow this. Thank you so much for what you do. Now, to hear a really good interview, I'm going to pass it over to me. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to It's a Matter of Speaking, a podcast for leading voices in the arenas of health, wealth, and relationships. Today, we're talking about what it means to be a true thought leader. I think it's in the realm of relationships. I'm excited to see how it blends into the others, wealth and health. But we are going to be speaking today with Larry Szeliga, who I just learned how to pronounce it. How'd I do?
You did better than my first wife.
Larry, man, I'm excited to chat with you. We have went through a road to get here. We have had reschedules. We've had errors on my end. And again, I apologize. I'll apologize on air so everyone can hear that. But thank you so much for being on the podcast, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
You really, when we started this, it was one initial idea. And then it shifted to what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about your background, really building organizations internally, like the human potential that an organization has. We're going to talk about your journey from hourly employee all the way to where you're at today. But you're becoming a leading voice when it talks about being a thought leader and really scaling an organization from the inside out. Can you tell me a little bit? I ask everyone this question. What does it mean to you to be a leading voice in the industry?
Well, I think it's very important for us as leaders to not only, I tend to shift away from the command and control type of management and more into the inspire, engage, and promote the success of my people. By doing that, you unleash their potential. And from a leader's standpoint, the more successful your people are, the more successful you are, and the more successful the organization can be.
Yeah, it almost sounds like thank you for that. Command and control is like, hey, we're doing this my way, right? Whereas what you're saying, inspire and engage, is you're more taking a back seat and allowing people to step into, because if you can inspire, you can engage them, they're going to step into what they can bring to the table. Yeah?
They're going to bring a lot to the table. You have to understand, my viewpoint is that people are the source of enormous untapped potential. As leaders, it's our responsibility to provide them with what they need to unleash that potential. And the more they are recognized, the more they're heard, the more they can do, the more freedom they have, the more they're going to give back to the organization.
Yeah, it almost sounds like your job as a leader, when I say yours, the person listening, your job as a leader or a manager is really just to learn how to take that lid off their potential so they can be free to express themselves and their strengths.
A leader will never be more successful than their people.
How do you think a leader, I mean, we're diving right into it before I get into your journey, but I'm curious now. For those that don't know, Dylan, Chief People Officer at Leader. And with that, I'm in charge of team culture. So I'm so curious to learn from you, man. How do you think a leader can consistently remind themselves? I think right now, just hearing that from you, a leader's going to be like, or a manager's going to say, well, of course. But then we all know we fall back, or managers fall back into those challenges. What can a manager or leader do to consistently remind themselves that their job is to let that untapped potential out?
That is absolutely a great example. It's also an embarrassment for me at some level. One thing is, if you develop the right relationship with your people, they're going to be very quick to tell you. Okay. But sometimes that doesn't happen. And there was a time in my career, maybe 10 years ago, where things just didn't feel right. It felt like I was stagnating, the organization was stagnating, and I didn't know what to do. Now, at the time, I had a personal coach, and I invited her to come in and shadow me through the organization, and then go back and talk to my people. And she did that. She was very good. She came back a week later, and she closed the door, and she says, well, I've got good news and bad news. I said, what's the good news? The people know that you are effective and you will get the job done. I said, yes, that's good. She said, the bad news? I said, yeah, what's the bad news? She says, you're the most hated man in the company.
Oh my.
It was like somebody stabbed me right in the heart. I can't believe that, because I always thought I had a good relationship. I think up until that time I did. But the company was growing so fast. We had split, and I was now running 2 companies, going global. And I just got in my own way. And I went back and I talked to the people and started working with the people, and primarily working on myself to make sure that I listened to my people, that they had the task environment that they needed to succeed. Did they know what their task was? Did they know how it was measured? Did they have the resources, et cetera, et cetera? But also from an environmental standpoint, was I giving them what they needed? Was I recognizing them, listening to them, fostering their growth? And things started to feel better. And a year later, I called her back in to repeat the process. And I got to tell you, I was scared. I was really scared. And she came back. She says, well, the bad news is you're not the most loved person, but they said you were the most trusted. They knew you always, they had their back, and that you were doing everything you could to make them successful. So it wasn't the complete package, but it opened the doors for me to see what my people needed in terms of the big issue was I didn't smile.
Yeah. I think, and consistently working on yourself is huge. I think it's refreshing to talk with someone who is known for scaling organizations internally, bringing the most out of their people, to hear that you went through your own dark night of the soul, if you will, where you weren't the person that was doing it, and to talk about it. I think a lot of times people get on podcasts and it just seems so fake, and it's all about the good stuff, and it's not about the challenges that we go through, right? But what I'm hearing from you is taking time to, one, invest in yourself, bringing this outside consultant or coach in, and then also consistently trying to grow yourself to help grow your people. I mean, people are addicted to that. Okay, we're going to put a small pin in that because I have other questions, but I am curious how this journey started, because you've worked with some big names, General Motors, GE Medical, a couple other ones that I couldn't even pronounce, which means they're good. But you didn't really start, as a leading voice. You started, you say, as an hourly employee and worked your way up. I am a storyteller. I love someone's story. Can you kind of talk about like that journey to the top, if you will?
Oh, sure. Where to start? Okay, so I was not what you would call a stellar student in high school. Mm-hmm. I barely got through. I had no interest in it. I had no interest in furthering my education beyond that, but my dad insisted that I at least get an associate's degree. And we talked it over. And back then, this is in 1970. Mm-hmm. So the electronic technology was advancing just like AI is today. It just skyrocketing. So I took electronic technology. Didn't set the world on fire, came out, could not find a job because every mother's son Also went after electronic technology because that was the growing field.
Mm-hmm.
I had to accept a job as a PC board stuffer, which
It
is one of the
sounds
most,
very sexy. It sounds extremely sexy.
it is the most boring thing in the world other than listening to me. It's one of the most boring things you could
I'm
ever
having
do.
fun.
You get a printed circuit board with
Mhm.
all these little holes and these little copper paths going through it. Your job is to sit there for 8 hours a day, take this resistor and put it in these two holes, take this diode, put it in these two holes, but make sure it's facing in the right direction. This transistor goes in these three all day long. And when you finish that board, you slide it aside and you get another one. And your supervisor is in a glass, literally in a glass room upstairs looking down to make sure nobody's talking.
Jeez, this sounds fun.
Oh,
How did you get out of this?
I got out of it because I wanted to be a technician, and technicians test department was right next to us.
Mhm.
So every day after work, when they went home, I went over there and tried to teach myself how to test the boards. And I did it for a couple of nights. And then one night, this guy in a flannel shirt and jeans walks up and says, "Who are you and what are you doing?" So I told him I was, who I was, and I was trying to learn how to test the boards because when an opening comes up, I want it. And he smiled and he said, "Well, my name is Bob and I used to be an engineer here. Let me show you a few things."
Mm.
And he would stop by a couple times a week to help me out. And then an opening came up and I got it.
Because you're the person that puts yourself out there. You're like, hey, I'll work overtime even though I'm not getting paid because I want to learn. This kind of comes back to consistently working on yourself.
Correct.
Someone like a Bob sees potential in you. And then where does it go from there?
Well, I was in the test department. I was doing really well because I had coaching from Bob on a lot of different things. I learned so much from him. And then one day they came out with this new computer memory board. Now, just to paint a picture for you, it was 128K and only weighed 4.5 pounds. Your smartwatch is around 60 gigabytes and weighs a little less than 2 ounces. Okay?
I'm pretty sure it goes K to megabytes, right?
Yeah, and then gigabytes.
Then gigabytes. So
Yeah.
we had a ways
So
a little bit better now.
It was huge. And we had a patent on it. And they assigned me to work on it. They wanted one board a day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 weeks and had one board.
Oh,
just
dear.
one. And one day my boss comes up and he's got a cardboard box. He says, "Put all your personal belongings in here. I'm taking you down to the COO's office for your exit interview. You're being terminated."
Oh, dear. Anytime someone comes with a cardboard box, I don't think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I've never had a good experience there. Never. Yeah. He walked me down there, and on the way there, I said, "What is a COO?" I had no idea. I was a novice. I had no idea what was going on. So he knocks on the door. He goes in. He comes out. He says, "Go on in." I go in, and I look behind the desk, and there sits Bob. The guy in a flannel shirt is now wearing a 3-piece suit. He's the COO of the company. He was the one that got me the position. He looked up at me. I was shocked and surprised, but he was equally shocked and surprised.
What did
he
I
never
do?
Put two and two together.
Recommending this guy.
And he tells my boss to go sit in the waiting room. He closes the door and he says, "What the hell is going on?" And I gave him the full story of what was going on. And then he started asking me questions about, what's it like working in that department? What would you do different, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, I walked out as the supervisor of the department. He promoted me right on the spot. And I got to tell you, I was horrified because I was the youngest person in the department. Mm-hmm. I had the least amount of education, the least amount of tenure. I had no idea how to manage. And I'm going to go up there and say, "Hey guys, guess what? I'm your new boss."
What, if you don't mind me asking there, because it is, I'm like, how the hell did that happen? What is it you feel you had or Bob thought you had that was different to be that supervisor?
Well, I think it was the fact that when he asked me what was wrong, I told him.
Yeah.
And I didn't point fingers at anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I told him the equipment was so old, the oscilloscopes were so old that we had to undo the fluorescent lights so that we could see the traces. We had 2 soldering irons for 12 guys. We were doing boards for, they have to run at room temperature, and then you have to take them up to 55 degrees centigrade to make sure they work at a whole temperature range. And while you're doing that, you have to change the voltages and everything. We had 1 oven. So if 3 guys were sitting there waiting for that oven, that's all dead labor. And I just went through little things like that. I said, and he said, how much is it going to cost? And I said, I don't have a clue. And he's put together a budget, and let's talk about it. And so that's how I got it.
And then from there, supervisor, you're now working with the companies that we're talking about. And it really seems like it's all about internal, like culture, as we were saying before the podcast started, right? Like the people, this untapped potential. So through this journey that you've had from supervisor to managing Inc. 1,000, Inc. 500 companies, or being a part of it, what do you think when it comes to the culture? What's the untapped potential? How do you untap it when there is so much pressure from the outside?
I went to my people and I explained what happened and said, so if you think I'm going to come in here and tell you how to do your job, you're crazy. I don't have a clue. I need you to tell me how to do my job. And they unloaded on me. And I said, well, let's take a couple of these and we'll go after them. And we started to fix those things they told me. And the efficiency, the performance, everything went up with the exception of absenteeism went down. And eventually I just felt that I was kind of limited on where I could go from here. It was a very small company. Bob actually called me up one day and said, hey, there's a General Motors plant here in town. I said, yeah, I know. It's a hardware manufacturing facility. He says, yeah, would you like to be a supervisor there? So he got me into GM. We cut a deal where I would help him select my replacement, train my replacement, and then work as a consultant for 6 months because he knew that I wasn't satisfied where I was, that I wanted more growth. And I got to tell you, walking into GM, I mean, I was going from a little, 50,000 square foot building to 1 million square feet under roof, 3,500 employees. I had no experience in metal shaping, forming, cutting, piercing, welding, extruding, bending, none of that. And the smell and the noise was just unsettling. And by day 3, I did not understand how you work with the union. I'd never worked with a union before. And by day 3, I was starting to question my intelligence on accepting a job that I had no clue how to succeed. Okay. I went from managing 18 people to 72. And finally, the third day, I just called them all together and I said, look, I've noticed a couple of things. I think you're all looking at me like, here's another shake and bake college boy who's going to come in and tell us to do our job. I said, you're partially right. I got a 2-year degree in electronics and it's not going to help me here. So yeah, I'm a college boy, but I don't have a clue what you're doing. The only thing I can see is that you're all older than me by at least 15 years. You're all looking at me like I'm insane. You all have decades of experience here. I have none. And I am the only one here that has all of his fingers. So I need you to tell me how to do my job. So it was the same thing, asking them what I needed to do to support them. What did I need to do to make them successful? And 6 months later, on my first review, they said they had seen improvements in all measurable metrics.
Do you then feel like, because it's like we're seeing this recurring pattern of you put yourself in a situation that you feel you're in over your head, right? But you at least are willing to get uncomfortable and say, I'm going to tackle that. And then when you get there, instead of coming in as this outside consultant or this outside guy that knows everything, you actually tell them, hey, I don't know anything. How can I better your job? So it's really hearing from, I don't want to call them the low-level employees, but the employees on the ground is where you're constantly tapping into, how do I make your job better or easier?
The company cannot succeed without those people. They are the ones that turn out. They're the ones that provide the service. They're the ones that provide the product. They're the ones that focus on, they have a big impact on the cost and the quality of the product. If you don't have them on your side, you're not going to win the battle. And I don't care if you're a supervisor, a manager, a director, a vice president, a CEO, it doesn't matter. If your people are not performing to their potential, you'll never reach the potential that you could gain.
I think hearing all this is great. Anyone hearing here that's listening to this podcast, that is more of like, they're the ones on the ground. They're probably hearing this podcast and they're like, fuck yeah, I'm the one. And if I'm excited to do what I'm doing, like, those are the troops that's going to build success for this company. Check. You've done that.
They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be respected.
Okay, but now let me take it to the other side. How do you get this across to the manager, the organizational leader, the CEO that's listening to this? What do they get out of it? Because I'm sure you know, it's like, yes, there's outside factors that come into a company that's constantly putting pressure on them, but there's also internal challenges. How do you get this message across to like the higher ups? Like, what is it that they want?
It's a hard question to ask because I never once went to my boss and said, this is what you have to do.
Right.
Okay. But they would ask me, how did you make this change? I used to go around and take people who were identified as problem people. And next thing you know, they're successful. There's a whole realm of things that you have to look at in terms of, do they know what they're responsible for? Do they think it's legitimate? Are they contributing? Does their contribution lead to the success of the organization? A lot of times people show up for work and they just feel like, I'm here to collect a check.
Mm-hmm.
But when you can get them to understand how they are contributing to the success of the organization, it's a whole new ballgame. And it tends to, people come to me and they would say, how did you do that? Can you help me do that? So I don't have a formula. Oh yeah.
Well, because that's what I was asking. It's funny you say that. You don't have a formula. What I'm not hearing from you, and I'm someone that loves frameworks, right? I love like kind of like the hard, here's like, look at this, then look at this, look at this, right? I'm not hearing a lot of formulas or frameworks for you. I'm hearing more of the soft skills, like for a leader that's listening to this, that wants to become better, that wants to get uncomfortable. What do you think is the hardest but most important soft skill for them to develop?
Okay, so here's where our vernacular may change. Okay. Most of the times when you're talking about business courses and so on and so forth, they do talk about culture a little bit. They talk about emotional intelligence, team building, et cetera, et cetera. And those are great skills. You need those. But if the voice of the leader is one that inspires and engages in change, okay, changes to make better, those skills are not always adequate. The skills I'm talking about are more along the line of organization development, where you're looking at action research, which was developed back in 1949 by Kirk Lewin, where he says, go in, identify the problem, verify that it's a problem, and then you go in and this is how you solve it. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then they went to the more common, or right now the one that is on top of the board in terms of new approaches, is generative change. It's going to your employees and saying, what is it you need to be successful? It's what is it that we can do to be better? It's painting an image of what can be that will generate collaborative work. I had a situation one time, if I can deviate just a little bit. I had taken on a new position with a company that I was responsible for a lot of the growth, but I was going to be working remotely as COO. And that came about because my wife wanted to move back to Ohio and live on the farm where her dad, where they grew up with her dad. And we were living in Rome, Georgia. So I turned in my retirement notice. I gave him a 2-year notice. And then just before I was supposed to retire, he came back. He says, I don't know what it is you do, but I don't want to lose you. Go live in Ohio and figure out what you're going to do to keep this company going. And the first week I was there, he calls me up and he's in a panic that our largest customer just had a repeat quality problem. We never had repeat problems, but we did this time. And He says, and I don't want you to get involved. This is new for you. I'm going down there on Monday. I'm going to fire everybody. I said, well, I can handle. No, 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 no. I'm doing this. It's not fair to you. So Sunday, I called him up. I said, by the way, I'm there. There's no need for you to come here. And the place was a disaster. The grass hadn't been cut. There was trash all over the place. There was a pavilion where they eat lunch, and it was leaning. It was going to collapse at any minute. The next morning, when I walked in the door, there was a deer head laying on the ground, a mounted deer head, and it had been there for so long that it had cobwebs on it. The carpet was stained and torn. And I mean, it was just, the place was a disaster. And they didn't know I was coming. They gave me a tour of the place, and there was no inventory control. It was not organized. It was a nightmare. And they knew it. I met with the whole staff, and we talked about it. And then we went out to lunch, and we're sitting. It was very quiet. Everybody had ordered, but it was really quiet. And then the plant manager looks at me and he says, so are you here to fire me? I said, fire you? Hell no. If I fire you, I'm going to have to run this damn place. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
What do I need to do to make you the most successful facility in the company? And they all just sat there like numb. And then they started to talk about it. And you know what? Within 6 months, they were the most successful facility in the company. And we took everything that I learned there.
6 months. I'm so
6
sorry.
months.
6 fucking months.
6 months. Okay. Wow. And they're doing about $3 million a month mounting tires.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is hard work, but that's a lot of money. The place was immaculate. And we took that facility by facility through the plant. The plant manager actually became one of my regional managers and was one of the strongest ones I had. Mm. But it was all coming back to what do I need to do for you to make you successful? And I look like a hero.
Yeah. You know? And when you're really someone that goes from place to place saying, how can I help you? Right. It's not like it. I guess that is what a hero does if you think about it. Right. But yeah. It was a great story, but to come back to the question of like the soft skills, the thing that I wrote down is it's less about the initial problem we see. If you're this manager, if you're this leader, you see a problem, you're like, okay, I know how to quick nix it, or I know how to change it. It's more about engaging in the change that they would need at a bottom level. And the last thing that I wrote is the power of believing in someone. Like for you to tell this company or this team, what can I do to help you become the best branch? Like to hear that from someone up top. Hopefully you finally figured out what COO meant when you were there. But hearing that from someone's got to be like, damn, they believe in me. What can I do? So it's like it's engaging in the change at a lower level. Is that what I'm hearing?
You're you're right on target. But that's the key to generative change. It's starting meaningful conversations that they can build on. And one of the skills that I talk about under organization development is developing change strategies that minimize resistance and maximize acceptance. And the way you do that is involve those most affected by the change in developing the strategy.
Minimize change. Minimize what? I'm sorry, say that
resistance.
Again. And
minimize resistance, maximize acceptance.
Love that.
Too often changes come down as a command from the top. We're back to command and control. Here's another change we want to do. Figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Instead, sit down with the people, identify what needs to be done, and then put together a strategy involving those that are most impacted by the change. If they're part of designing the strategy, you've already beat the resistance.
Yeah, you've beat me to it because it's like if they're coming up with it, they're seeing this stuff every day. One.
Yeah.
Two, if they're coming up with the change that needs to happen and then you say, hey, we're listening to you, they have so much more responsibility or like they want that responsibility. Say, hey, give me the ball. I'll run with this rather than you telling them they have to.
To be clear, it works at all levels of the organization. It's not just the guys and gals on the floor. It's through all levels of the organization.
What do you think is the biggest mindset shift leaders need to incorporate to be down with this? Because I imagine it sounds great, right? But what's
It's,
the biggest mindset shift?
it's accepting the fact that people are the source of enormous untapped potential. And as leaders, it's our responsibility to equip them with the knowledge and skills and resources they need to unleash that potential.
Yeah.
And then get the hell out of their way.
Well, it almost sounds like, too, the untapped potential, if we're speaking to the leaders, the pinnacle leaders of a company, the untapped potential they have is not to be, hey, I'm the leader, all eyes on me, look at me, and this is why I'm here. It's because they have the most potential to become a facilitator for the rest of their company.
Yes.
Man.
That's very, very, very true.
And that's I can imagine for some, that's got to be a big ego hit. They're like, no, I'm at the top for a reason. Look at my brain, look at my heart, look at everything that I know. And really it's, no, to get at, if you're a true leader, all you're great at is pulling that brilliance out of others.
It's one more story.
And then I have one more question before we get into, like I always tell people, the uncomfortable part of the podcast.
Okay.
No, tell me the one more story.
So I have been promoted to the corporate office for Chevrolet, Pontiac, and GM of Canada in the quality department. And I was doing trust building workshops between union and management so that we could improve the working conditions. And the corporate vice president of quality sent me an email telling me he wanted me at this conference room at 2:00 the next day to teach him and his staff everything they needed to know to facilitate meetings, but I only had 30 minutes.
Great.
How do you do that in 30 minutes?
No pressure, easy.
And he was a great guy. I mean, they have documentaries on him as he's a West Point graduate. I mean, he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I went in and I said, here it is, everything you want to know in 30 minutes. And I went through some of the basics about airtime and keeping people involved and, and I said, but the best way to learn, Joe, is you're going to facilitate this group to solve a problem. He said, okay, I'm ready. He grabs the marker, he goes up to the flip chart, and he says, okay, what are we working on? And I put the mission statement up there. I said, your job is to hear from each of your direct reports on what their department has to do to support that mission. And I went back to the room and I'm standing there and the meeting's going on. We're well past the half hour. And all of a sudden the magic marker comes flying past my head. And I looked at it because I kind of wasn't paying it. I was watching the people. I wasn't watching him. He says, you SOB, you set me up to fail. This mission statement's a piece of crap. It's nothing but a bunch of buzzwords knitted together with bullshit. I said, okay, so now your new project is how do you fix that? And we met every day for 3 weeks to fix that. So it really came back to the same thing. If you don't understand your mission statement, if it's nothing more than a bunch of fad words linked together, your people don't know what their task is. They don't know what their responsibility is. They don't see how what they're doing is linked to the success of the organization. So it's all part of the same puzzle.
I actually am going to skip the next question I wanted to ask because this goes right.
Good, because you said it was going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. No. I'm skipping the easy question. We're going into the uncomfortable part.
Okay.
No, I call it the uncomfortable 3 because I wanted to initially name this podcast the Uncomfortable Thought Leader because I think part of being a leader in an aspiring voice, a leading voice, a thought leader, if you will, is consistently getting uncomfortable, right? Like you put that leader in a very uncomfortable situation, and it can be easy for someone to be like, you son of a bitch, you set me up to fail. But if you do look at your journey, whether you were knowing it or not, you consistently put yourself in the uncomfort zone, whether it's working extra to talk to that technician and meeting Bob, whether it's talking to Bob and then all of a sudden you're placed as a supervisor, whether it's leaving there to go to General Motors and then like, holy shit, you're all older than me and I have to tell you you're consistently getting outside your comfort zone. Why for you is it so important to get outside that comfort zone in order to pursue something you're passionate about?
It's a personal belief that if you don't stretch yourself, you're not going to grow. And if you're not going to grow, you're never really going to be happy. You're really never going to succeed and reach your full potential. And yeah, the biggest thing holding people back is fear. And it's my belief that the best way to move through that is just to lean into the fear. What's the worst thing that can happen to you? Get fired? I got fired once. Uh, ended up, I was a director of marketing for a company and I got fired. The owner of the company took a sabbatical to run for president of the United States in 96. And the guy that took his place fired me the next day. I still don't know why. He just called me up and said, "You're fired, get out." And the very next day, the owner called me up. He says, "You're not fired. No, nobody has the ability to fire you except me. And I didn't say you were fired." I said, "Well, I already have a job." I was hired as COO by your brother in a different company.
Oh dear, that had to be a great next Thanksgiving. Well, you answered this for him. You answered the second question of why do you think most people don't, which is fear. But I want to double down, if you will, of you said the reason you consistently get outside your comfort zone is your belief is to stretch yourself to be able to reach your potential. So when you think of one's potential, whether it's yours, whether it's mine, whether it's somebody listening, like having them stretch to reach their potential, can you talk about what that feels like, why that's so important? Again, I like that mission statement, stretching to reach your potential could just be a nifty buzzword. Why is that so important, or what does that feel like?
So I kind of give it a different look. So if you look at a stream coming through the forest, the water is moving, it's crystal clear, it's got all kinds of wildlife and fish and frogs and lizards and all kinds of stuff flowing down that stream. It's clean, it's moving. And then it gets to a slower pace and you start to see more stuff growing, more algae, more plants, fewer fish and other wildlife. And then it goes into a stagnant pond. And all this stuff just gathers up on it, trash and algae and so on, and you don't see any life. So as long as it's moving, it's growing, it's vibrant, but when it stops and becomes stagnant, it dies. And it's the same with people. You want to excel at anything, you have to stretch yourself. When I wanted to learn to shoot a rifle, I wanted to be able to shoot 200 yards and hit the target. And then, long story short, I hired somebody to teach me, and next thing you know, I'm shooting targets at 1,000 yards. Okay. Is that enough? No. Next week, I'm going down. I'm going to start working on a mile. I've tried it on my own. I can hit maybe 3 out of 6 shots at a mile, depending upon the conditions, obviously.
Right.
But if you're not stretching, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, you're going to become stagnant. And if you become stagnant, that's the first step towards dying, mentally, physically, emotionally. That's my personal belief. And I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did, and it kind of answers my last question, which is
good. We're done.
No. I want to go one step further though, because the last question is, what would you tell someone that's on the cusp of getting outside their comfort zone? Right? They're like they're dipping a toe in, and what I'm hearing from you is stay moving, don't stagnate. Let's try to really break that down for the last question. Then is what's the first step someone can take in order to stay moving?
Ask yourself. What if whatever, what would happen? And then dare to find out.
Man, doing research on you, the one question I skipped is tell me about the what if model. So I really appreciate that. That was a good taste of it for anyone here. Larry, this was incredible. Yes, it took us 3 weeks to get to this of rescheduling and challenges, but I have a shit ton of notes. I want to first off thank you. We're going to come right back before we end this, but some of the recap notes that I took is the importance as a leader to inspire, engage, rather than command and control. Seeing your business, whether it is the ground employees, the mid-level managers, your leadership team, if you're a CEO or president of a company, see the untapped potential that they have and develop that relationship with them in order to open up that jar and let that potential out. And because as you increase in a business, or as you grow in a business, get higher and higher in the hierarchy, if you will, your job is really to become a master facilitator. And if you're consistently working on yourself like you did in your journey, it will be much easier to then help that team do the same. This interview was the process of staying humble and keeping a learner's mindset, right? We talk about at the end, any change strategy comes from minimizing resistance, maximizing acceptance, and that happens when you hear from everybody on your team. We have the untapped potential. The biggest thing that gets in our way is fear, and what you talk about is stretch yourself, stretch your beliefs and what your potential might be, and stay moving. Don't stagnate. And the best way to do it is that what if mindset. Ask yourself, what if this happened? And then dare to make it a reality. This was such a fun interview.
It was. And listening to your summary, you should do a podcast on this.
I'm doing my best, man. No, I took a bunch of notes. If you are listening, what was your biggest takeaway? Yes, I recapped them all right there. What was your biggest takeaway? Feel free to put it in the comments below. As always, drop a like so we can help Larry reach the CEOs and leaders that need to hear this stuff. The more we like, the more we comment, the more we help Larry spread his message. Was such an honor. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. Larry, thank you so much for your brilliance and your mastery.
And Dylan, thank you. I mean, you drew the best out of me. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. We'll end it there. See you all next week.
Sounds good.